the young, tarantulas creeping through the stream. Now the pulse matches the dream. Spiders crawl.
Hey everyone, welcome to our very first episode of Web Wonders. So happy to be here and welcome to the show, our new little buddy. This is Rocco, a Veil Chameleon. But thank you everyone for watching, and I just wanted to give a really quick shout out to our sponsors. Ship Our Reptiles, Arc Adventures, Shed Outfitters, Cold Blood Crew Cafe, Hognose Hub, and CNB Reptiles. So for our very first guest, he is a musician, a tarantula breeder, and so much more. Please welcome Rashad Mary's Webs. Hi, Rashad.
Hi, how are you? How's everybody?
Hi,
Pleasure to
great.
be
Thank
here.
you. Yes. So, Rashad, please, thank you for coming on the show. Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name's Rashad. I have two companies. One is Mary's Webs. The others is True Exotics West. I'm a Cali baby. I'm from Compton, California. I've always been an exotic animal enthusiast. Just always been in love with exotic animals, as well as cats, dogs, and domestic animals. I see myself as a teacher. I love to break the stereotypes that are held with most species, especially species that people tend to have fears of, like invertebrates, centipedes, scorpions, crocodile monitors, and things of that nature. Most of the species that get bad reputations.
Right. So, speaking of being a teacher and today's topic of entomology and taxonomy, today's world we live in, everything's about technology, and books are being thrown out the window of our school systems. And so, what we really want to focus on is how is the entomology and taxonomy implicated in today's society? Like, as a teacher, we want our children and to become future hobbyists when they grow up, and everyone when they first start or when they first come into the hobby is their main thing is to know the common names of the animals that they're getting, but do they really know the scientific aspects behind it? So what's your mentality of knowing the scientific names? How important is it to know that?
So in my perspective, I would say common names are important, but if we really want to get specific, the scientific designations of the species, the genus, are very important. So we have what is called taxonomic hierarchy. And so, you have kingdom, you have phylum, you have class, you have order, you have family, then you have genus, and you have species. Each one of those designations are very important because it gives kind of how could I say it? I wouldn't say guidelines, but it kind of boxes off each species within its genus and within its family. And so the taxonomic hierarchy is what is used to basically classify all living things. And that system works hand in hand with the system also known as binomial nomenclature. And so it is very important because you have different. So let's talk about the family Theraphosiddae. That's including all tarantulas. And so within that family, you have certain genus. So the genus can give you an idea of the characteristics that are similar within that group of tarantulas. So, for example, if we want to talk about Brachypelma, and all Brachypelmas, regardless of their differences, because there's many different species within that genus Brachypelma, the similarities that they share are more like prolific hair kicking, being very vibrant in coloration. Their geographic range can also be a characteristic that they share in that genus. So most species of Brachypelma, if not all, come from South America. So you could expect them in many parts of Mexico. They're long-lived. So if you hear the genus Brachypelma, expect a female of that species or that genus, I should say, to live anywhere from 25 to 30 years under perfect conditions.
That's right.
The binomial nomenclature, it's really specialized names. And so we have like two ways we can look at it. We can look at it the indigenous way, or we can look at it the mainstream way. So the indigenous way is basically the indigenous people of the areas that those specific species or that genus is native to have names that they've given that species over, thousands or millions of years, that their people from that part of the world are familiar with that animal as. For example, the genus Tiltacado. So Tiltacado is an ancient language. Well, the name is from a ancient language. So Tilto meaning black, and then Cato meaning spider, is the indigenous people of that area their language. And so they basically called that genus black spider. And so you have Tiltacado vagans, you have, which would be the Mexican red rump. You have Tiltacado verdezi, which would be the Tiltacado rose gray. Now, there's plenty of other ones that we can go on, like Tiltacado schroderi, the Mexican black velvet. All of these spiders may have slight differences. Like the red rump has more of a red abdomen, but in essence, they're a black tarantula. And for the most part, they have very dark colorations. And so that is part of how the binomial nomenclature can be used. But then we have the mainstream way that was basically introduced by a European naturalist by the name of Carl Linnaeus. And so the system that he created, or is documented as being the founder of, basically does the same thing, but just using Greek or Latin. So like we were just talking about brachypelma, brachy meaning short in Greek, and then pelma meaning foot. It's just a way of attributing a name to that specific genus due to their characteristics. And so I think it's something that's very important, because you have certain species like like Nandu chromatis,
right.
Nandu chromatis, or you may have Acanthoscuria genticulata that look very, very similar. And so you may get confused because they're both from Brazil, but you may call this one the Brazilian black and white, or you may call this one the Brazilian red and white, or red and black, and now you're confused. So when you're using binomial nomenclature, it allows you, or the scientific community, to specifically talk about a specific species, and for everybody to universally know exactly what entity you're talking about.
Right. And so when we're talking about the arachnids in the hobby, a lot of people think tarantula is a spider. Technically, yes, but they're different from spiders, because tarantulas, although a spider, are considered majority bigger than an actual spider, and then true spiders and everything. But for just to give an example, like how you said the Tiltacado shidori. Now I don't know if you can see it, but in here is what a mature male T shidori. But in our experience, how well, or how would you agree on this statement that every hobbyist, although they should know the scientific names, but how well should they know the geographic dynamic when it comes
I think
to
that
going?
I think that that's a good point to bring up. It's all inclusive. We should be trying to learn as much as we can. Like, I don't like to call myself a hobbyist. I like to say that this is a lifestyle for me. Every aspect of my day is basically tailored around learning new information, dealing with different types of species. When you're talking about their geological range, or their geographic range or distribution, it's important to know these key key insights because it allows you to understand the husbandry that is required for that genus or that species. When you know about their geographic range, then you know what type of soil would be best for them. Should you have isopods? Should you have springtails? Would moss be a good additive? You know, what is the humidity parameters? We know if we're talking about Poecilotheria, that genus Poecilotheria, automatically, you know, from your learning, you should know that okay, Poecilotheria are a tree or an arboreal tarantula that are endemic to India. So with that information, you should already know that humidity parameters can be anywhere from, you know, high 75% all the way up to, you know, high 90s. Some species come from provinces where there's 100% humidity. So understanding those geographical differences or those geographic differences allows us to provide better husbandry in captivity and just be better stewards of the hobby.
Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up because a lot of people, when they first get into the hobby, they have the care guides from the chain pet stores, and the majority of it, it's just the basic knowledge, but it's not the whole thing. And so, what we want to do for a young hobbyist is spread out, expand out with your not your knowing and your knowledge, and ask, don't just go to one resource, go to many others who are well educated, because I always say basic is not better. Better is knowing everything and everything possible. But you know, when it comes to like our young ones, we really need that because they are our future. You know, as cliche as it sounds, they really are. So how important would you say having the tenacity and consistency of studying at a young age?
It's very important. I know my grandfather, he always taught me that consistency is key. It's not what you can do amazing one time, it's what you can do consistently, you know, for a span of time that will make the difference.
Yep.
I would say when you wanted to get into this lifestyle, you should never feel as if you know it all. Like, I don't see myself as a professional or a specialist of anything. Um, I have a lot of experience, but I'm always open to learn new things. You know, I believe that we're always learning new stuff about specific exotics. You know, when we're talking about science or being scientific, science is based off of fact. The truth about facts is that they change often. So always be open to learn. You know, you can never know too much. You can never be, you know, too grown for your own britches, as you know, my family would used to tell me. You always should be open to learn. We can never stop learning. Life is about elevation, about you know, breaking the norms. And I just think, you know, you have an open mind, you understand that this hobby, this lifestyle is expanding. We should be expanding with it.
Exactly. So one of the main questions that I wanted to ask you was, how did you get, or yeah, when and how did you get into the hobby?
Okay, so yeah, so my mother and my grandmother have been instrumental, and especially in my youth, with me, you know, getting into the animal hobby. They've always, you know, supported me in my endeavors. I would have 150-pound sulcata tortoises in the backyard, you know, having
Those are
carpet pythons.
big.
Yeah, really big guys, you know, and
Yeah.
peacocks and just all different types of stuff that the normal, you know, brown boy from Compton wouldn't traditionally have.
Mm.
And so they really encouraged me, and they saw that love that I had, and they understood that it was authentic. So they supported me. That, you know, I definitely had a zoo before anybody on YouTube was
Yeah.
publicizing their zoo. You know, I've had pigeons, I've had goats, I've had all different types of animals, you know.
Oh,
So
wow.
I would say it started in my youth,
Hmm.
and my mother, my grandfather, my grandmother basically supporting me, you know, and allowing me to live my truth. And so that just sparked it, you know. I felt
Hmm.
free, I felt comfortable, and it's always been true to me. So from that, it just grew.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful thing when you have that support system. Um, I just saw a podcast yesterday, and I think when you have that support system, it just makes everything go easy. Everything just feels right. And I think in the hobby, when we stand out and we help each other, support each other, like for example, hey, this happened to my Therafosa, or hey, this happened to my chameleon. I can't just confide in Google. I need to go out there and ask someone who's had experience. So I think like if we continue to expand our experience to others, and then they do that for others as well, this hobby can really be a solid foundation. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I 100% agree with what you just said. It's the truth.
Yeah. And when I started, I would say 10 years ago or so, but like really get into the hobby about like 5 years ago. And so my first, what was it? First expo I first met Caleb Hill from Wicked Webs,
Okay.
and he gave me one of the best advice when he first showed me. I think it was a rose hair, a Chilean rose hair, Grammostola.
Yes.
And he said, if you want a Grammostola, make sure you know which Grammostola. And I said, why? Because aren't they all the same? He said, no. Yeah, they might look, a little similar, and they might feel a little similar, but because I asked him, I wanted a Grammostola pulchra, and he said, a pulchra. Are you sure you want a pulchra or a poker piece? I said, I said a poker piece, and then he's like, are you sure you want a polka or poker piece? Know the difference. And I was like, okay, wait. My research was the Brazilian black lab. He's like, okay, that's pulchra. I'm like, okay. So at the time when I was getting started, I was like getting confused with the names. But once you have like a visual on what species you have, then you can mark it down and be like, okay, this is a pulchra, Brazilian black lab, and then a poker piece. It's an old world, and you can literally tell the difference. But because the names are so similar, it's easy to get distracted or to get off guard with it. So that's why I really heavily advise new hobbyists to know the scientific names, because sometimes a breeder might give you something that you want, but it actually isn't. So that's really important. Yeah.
Very much so. I agree with you. And
Hmm.
like how you brought up the Grammostola pulchra, the Brazilian black, and the poker peas. Yeah, it's very interesting because you're saying the old world. Yeah, so the Harpectera poker peas, the golden blue leg baboon,
Hmm.
that poker piece, can be confusing because there's a Grammostola poker piece, and
Hmm.
so that is the Chaco Goldeni.
Yeah.
So just adding fuel to your flame. You're absolutely correct. Knowing those scientific names can be the difference of getting your dream arachnid or
Mhm.
getting something that you have to grow into loving.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was so scared. I'm like, uh, it's not a hot bacteria. It's a gram soda, but it starts with a P. So I'm like, where am I going with this? So it's so important. So thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, so now I have a Grammostola poker piece. I have the Grammostola pulchra, and I do have a hot bacteria poker piece. So it's a lot of P's. It's a lot of G's. It's a lot of, you
Yes.
know, yeah. But it's so detrimental to know the scientific names. And my advice to those who are just getting started: don't worry about the pronunciation as of now, because you can later on get into it later. But as long as you know, like visually, what species it is, do little flashcards, and everything will work out great. Everybody. But yeah, so for young ones in the school system, I feel like the entomology aspect has blown out the window completely. It's just basic information that doesn't really get into a deep dive. What are some ways or some ideas that the school systems can better themselves for the kids?
So what I would say is, I have my own opinion on the whole school system as a whole. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But to keep it focused on the topic that we're speaking on, I would say, teaching the babies about wildlife, letting them understand that we are one, and life forms come in different shapes, different sizes, but at the end of the day, we are all creation.
Yes.
So I believe that teaching the children about conservation, how to grow their own food, understanding, by looking at this plant, oh, it's drooping a little bit, okay, it needs water, or okay, it's getting a little bit yellow, it has too much water, or oh, it's browning up at the tips, okay, nitrogen deficiency, will spark the interest and the understanding that, hey, I can communicate with these other living things without speaking words. So like I feel like being verbal is more primitive than using our intuition. I feel like if we taught them that we're one, we encourage them to listen to self and to use their intuition, they would be better off. And also the world would be better off, because now these are going to be the next group of amazing scientists, amazing conservationists, amazing hobbyists that have a deeper connection with the wildlife as well as the environment. I see a lot of people, getting caught up in the monetary aspect of this hobby or industry. And yes, it can be a very lucrative hobby and a lucrative industry, but we need to push that to the side. It is a lot more lucrative when we come to knowledge and information, and to the potential that it has to be a part of the solution and not the problem when it comes to the world and the species that are critically endangered, extinct waiting, or even just endangered. If we can teach our youth how important it is to have a symbiotic relationship and actually be the keepers and the, how can I say it? If they can understand how important it is to be the stewards of the land, then we can basically stop the problems, or most of the problems that are important and that we have going on today. So I think that if we implement that into the school system, we'd be a lot better off as a species of people.
And a lot of people don't realize this, but uh, we're in today's society that everything is bills, money. I mean, yeah, that's basic stuff that we need to know and learn, but look around you. Everything is all life.
Yes.
And day by day it's being destroyed. Day by day it's our ecosystems are being either polluted, mixed matched, and our dying species are being extinct. And that's what we're doing. We're conserving these animals. And no, just because some people think that they live in these small enclosures, that's no. They live fine. They live perfectly. And what we do is actually real work. You know. So how is it for you where you live? The not economy, the geographic era, like how bad have you seen from 10 years ago to now? How bad has it been out there?
So I'm from California, so it's always been mostly a concrete jungle until you start going to like up north a little bit, then you'll start seeing more green. But for the most part, California has been a concrete jungle. Specifically, I was raised in the Richland Farms. It's an amazing community in Compton where it's farmland. It's some of the richest land in Compton. So you see people actually having farms, having goats, having chickens, having all different types of farm life. Horses are a big thing in the Richland Farms. They call them the Compton Cowboys. So like, there's a facility called the Junior Posse where they teach the children about equestrians and how to be a steward of equestrians. So in whole, there's not too much wildlife that you'll see in a natural setting unless you're at the zoo or you're going to like the Los Angeles forest. But there are species that have made the concrete jungle their home. So you can see their tenacity, you can see their resilience, where they're not letting, the destruction of their natural habitat stop them from thriving.
So what are the species of tarantulas that you've seen either in the wild or that are in that region?
So throughout the whole California, you have many different species. The species that we have here are the genus Aphanopelma.
Mm.
So, for example, if you're up in Bakersfield, you could expect to see a Aphanopelma Johnny Cash Eye. Yes, named after the man in black, Johnny Cash. And so Johnny Cash Eye are a long-lived species in the genus of Aphanopelma. Females can live anywhere from 25 to 30 years. They're very slow growers, but they're beautiful. They make a great docile species that you can hold. And then if we want to go, down south a little bit, like to the San Diego area, we can find Aphanopelma steindachnery or Steindachner's ebony tarantula, another beautiful species. They're very dark, very long-lived, and they're very docile. They're a little bit more fast than the Johnny Cash Eye. So I would say they're not the first on the list for a novice keeper, but they're one that you don't have to worry about really kicking hairs at you or, throwing a threat posture out of the blue.
Yeah.
If they're well fed, they're well hydrated, you can have an amazing experience with them.
Yeah.
I would say if you're looking at somewhere like the Inland Empire, we can find what is called, or even in the Central Valley, you can find what is called Aphanopelma utilanum, which is commonly known as the California ebony tarantula.
Yeah.
Also, Aphanopelma. That's why I was saying it's so important to know these scientific designations, that binomial nomenclature, that taxonomic hierarchy, because when you hear that Aphanopelma, you should already associate, okay, it's a slow grower, very long-lived, typically docile. But yeah, Aphanopelma utilanum is a beautiful species of tarantula. A lot of people have them out here as natives as their first tarantula.
Oh, wow. So last summer I went to, every year, every September, or between August and September, there's always down the street from me a reptile expo, and the locals from my state, they always come down. So they know me. And one of them from the molting pots, he's like, oh, hey, I got this for you. And it was a freebie. And it was a Johnny Cash. And I was like, oh, it's so tiny. It was microscopic. It has not grown. So I am really aware that Aphanopelma grow incredibly slow. So that's one thing that I always, when people ask me, what's my first tarantula that I should get? And I'm like, well, the basic ones and the beginner ones are the ones that are going to grow so incredibly slow. But, they do last long and they're really great. Aphanopelma is like the number one species, of genus that you can get. So it's so like microscopic small. I don't think it's even molted yet. It's so small. Yeah.
Yeah, they grow so slow. And then I don't want to forget, Aphanopelma, typically their color schemes are either dark brown or a tan, because you also have like the Aphanopelma hensey, But I also want to say there's a colorful Aphanopelma called Aphanopelma bicoloratum, the Mexican bloodleg, and or Aphanopelma more, the Fuego Jade. So you have some really, really colorful Aphanopelma. They're just a little bit more rare than the common Aphanopelma chalcodes, the Arizona blonde.
Right. And so now that you brought that up about the coloration, there is this Aphanopelma, I forgot the species, but it has blue fangs. And so a friend of mine was like, oh, I want to get a blue fang, and it's a new world. I'm like, and no, he said it's an old world. And I said, old world blue fang, okay. Do you mean the Cyanogathus? And he was like, no. Or Chiropagopus. Oh my gosh.
Chiropagopus?
Yes. And I'm like, wait, you said it's brown? He's like, yeah, it's brown, but with blue fangs. I'm like, but the old world, it's not that. What do you mean? He's like, and then he showed me a picture. I'm like, oh, that's an Aphanopelma, but it does have blue fangs. And he was like, oh, well, no, I meant the other one. I'm like, oh my gosh. So be careful out there. So there's an Aphanopelma. I forgot the name of the species.
The blue front?
The chelicerae are blue.
I believe it is the Aphonopelma bucea. It's known as the blue front.
Okay. Oh, that's it. Okay, Juice, no problem. Thank you so much for coming and watching. Shout out to Juice's Arthropods.
What's up, Juice?
Yeah. But yeah, so I'm gonna have to look it up, but Tom Patterson has them, or he did. Now that I've mentioned it's probably gonna sell out quickly. But yeah, it's an Aphonopelma. It's gray, brown, and it has the blue chelicerae. And a lot of people get it confused with the Ceropogophus.
Okay, yeah, I believe that's the Aphonopelma bucea. They're called the blue front. They're beautiful species of Aphonopelma, and they have a very blue front. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of people, I heavily suggest make sure what species you're getting, because some of them do look alike. And you have brought up the bicoloratum. So in America, we have very similar tarantulas that are so-called red knee, like
Yes.
the Brachypelma genus. Now there's the Homori, the Smithi, the bicoloratum, even though it's not a Brachypelma, but however, all those, like in Texas, they're called flame leg. California, what are they? Red knee, the common names.
Yes. Yeah. So like the Brachypelma homori or homori and the Brachypelma smithi are red-legged or
Yep.
red knee, excuse
Yep.
me. And then the smithi or smithi is the giant red knee.
Right. And then we have the last one, the auratum.
Yes, the flame knee.
Yes, so they all look alike, and a lot of people say, I want the flame knee, or they go to a store and they see it, but it's not the actual thing that they wanted. And that's another reason, learn the scientific names, because some of them are similar, and you might get one, and then it's just, the common names are just so, it's convenient, yes, but it's very inconvenient, so it's very it's not overwhelming when it comes to wanting to know what kind of species you want, but it is detrimental.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that the common names leave room for error. So when you're dealing with those scientific names, those scientific designations, there's really no room for error.
Yeah.
And I thought it was beautiful how you brought up the Brachypelma, the similarities. You have the Brachypelma bomi, the fire leg, the Mexican fire leg. There's a species that's not really talked about too much that looks almost identical to the boemi or the bomi, the Mexican fire leg.
Yeah.
And it is called Brachypelma baumgarti. It is also known as the orange beauty, but with the untrained eye, it's very easy to get that baumgarti confused with a boemi. They look very similar. Just the reds are fainter on the baumgarti. It's more of an orange. They'll have that red flame on its knee like the Brachypelma auratum, the flame knee, but it will have the orange on the leg, similar to a Aphonopelma bicoloratum. So you're absolutely right. That scientific nomenclature is very important. If you want to know what you're talking about, you don't want any confusion, use the scientific name.
Exactly. And another good example of that would be the Theraphosa genus, because we have Theraphosa sturmi, Theraphosa blondi, and Theraphosa apophysis. Now, those three, although Theraphosa, they're all three different species. And so the most two that look identical to the untrained eye is the blondi and sturmi. And they have the common name bird eater, or, it is. I see it at pet chain stores, and I see it labeled as Goliath bird eater, but yet you also have the Lasiodora, that's also a bird eater, and then you also have the Nandus that are also bird eaters. So it's like, what do I get? Like, well, you got to know the species and genus. Oh, Rashad, this is a good question for you. Has some interesting species behind him. Oh, can you show us some of your favorite species?
Absolutely. Just give me 1 second.
Yeah. me read the questions here. Right. Yeah, this is so exciting. Wow, you have a really great collection. It's so big. Oh my gosh, a pokey.
Yes. So this is Poecilotheria regalis, also known as the Indian ornamental. This is a mature female. She'll live 10 to 12 years. And yes, they are an old world from India. They do have a stronger venom, but as you see, they get a bad reputation. So this is what I love doing. Dealing with species that get a bad rap and showing that they're not as scary as people
Mhm.
make them out to be. It's all about understanding the species, understanding their body language, as well as their needs. And then, working with them and making sure that they feel comfortable, while doing it in a safe way, making sure that I'm not putting myself or the tarantula in harm.
Exactly.
It's really about, learning about them, but understanding what she can and can't do with that specific genus or species. So I would not recommend someone handling a Poecilotheria. I want to make that disclaimer. But I
Yes.
also want to put on the record that this is a tree spider. So it's living and doing flips off the trees and grabbing on to
Mhm.
other branches. So it's okay for me to hold this while I'm standing up. Her abdomen is not too plump, so I'm not too worried about her, falling and hurting herself.
Right.
Now, if we were holding like a fossorial, like let's say Kilobrachy species Natanacharum, which used to be the electric blue, that is something that I would say don't hold at this height. And
Mhm.
you shouldn't be holding that old world anyway, because it's very defensive. But
Yeah.
if had enough
Mhm.
understanding of the species and you wanted to hold it, then I would say, get as
Yeah.
low as you can to the floor to basically prevent any type of injury to the specimen. Also, with like a Phonopelma or Brachypelma species that are
Mhm.
terrestrial, they're
Terrestrial.
not built to take a fall. If
Right.
this Poecilotheria right here wanted to jump off of me, she would jump off of me and she would go into a ball, kind of like Spider-Man. And right before she hit the ground, she would open up. And
Right.
so she would stop herself from taking any fall damage. So it's just about understanding the species, understanding what's okay for them, and not
Mhm.
all species can be handled the same. So
Exactly.
I'm gonna go ahead
And
and put this girl back, but
yeah.
it's,
Well, you
that's a 9-inch specimen.
yeah. And the for all pokies, so do they all grow the same length,
You said the same length or the same rate?
the same rate, like length
Um,
and
so no. So basically documented the species Poecilotheria rufiolata is the largest of the pokey species. And then you'll have like the beautiful blue, the Goody Sapphire or Poecilotheria metallica is typically known as the smaller species of Poecilotheria, maxing out about 4.5 inches. 5 inches would be seen as a very big metallica. And
mhm.
the Indian ornamental is one of the larger species. They typically max out at about 7 to 9 inches. But then you have Sapusca lowland, you have Sapusca highland, you have Poecilotheria smithi, you have Poecilotheria tigrina wasseli. It's so many different species in the genus Poecilotheria, and they
Yes.
all have different leg spans. The
Mhm.
largest documented being Poecilotheria rufiolata, and then I would say, following that probably would be Poecilotheria smithi, which is extinct waiting. It's a species that is extinct waiting, or should I say waiting on extinction.
Right.
Um, but just the genus Poecilotheria in whole is a species that's either endangered, critically endangered, or awaiting extinction. So it's
Right.
unfortunate, that some of the most beautiful tarantulas in the world are almost non-existent in the wild.
Right. And I'm glad that you brought up Pisotherapy, because there's also the Vitata that
Yes.
has a clear restriction on importing. So there's some states that you cannot um, import. Like, say, for example, you have like it cannot cross lines unless
Yes,
you have it
absolutely.
in a state. Um, and you wanted to like give it to someone or whatever, it would have to be on a loan. So you cannot, that animal cannot be crossed state lines because of the import laws and the ESA list. So that's something to really know about. So if you're wanting a Poecilotheria vittata, it's got to be on a loan, or good luck trying to find one.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can also receive it as a gift.
Yeah.
Really, with those bans, they
Yeah.
really don't want any money associated with the transaction. So
Right.
as long as it's not a part of commerce, then you're
Right.
not violating any
Bylaws.
laws, right? Any bylaws.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like it's a gray area in that I would say if you're not an attorney, don't dabble in potentially violating any
Yeah.
federal laws.
Right.
Okay. So, but yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, the Vittata, you have the Safusca, lowland and
Mm-hmm.
highland are protected, so they're not something that you can, cross state lines with, especially if it's money involved. It
Exactly.
wouldn't be
Yeah.
a smart idea.
Yeah. So do you have one, Vittata?
I have slings.
Oh.
Um, of larger specimen, I would say I have Metallica, I have Trigrino Weselli, I have Rufialatas, and then this right here is just like really just part of my collection. This is not my whole collection. This is what I have on hand
Mm-hmm.
in arm reach right now. But
Oh.
yeah, me
Yeah.
and my family, we have 6,000 adults. We have 13,000 juveniles and slings. And then,
Oh Lord.
yes. And so right now we're at a point where we had about 14,000 praying mantis, but we've significantly lowered that number from going to trade shows. And so right now we have about 2,000 praying mantis left.
Wow. And
Yeah.
those are so beautiful and also very fragile, are they not?
They can be. Praying mantis need a lot of airflow. So, you know,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people who are familiar with the tarantula hobby, who've been in it for some time,
Mm-hmm.
understand like species like Avicularia or Carabina versicolor, that cross ventilation is very
Yes.
important for their survival. And without it, they can die.
Right.
Very similar to praying mantids. If you're going to have something in like a deli cup, it would
Yeah.
need to have cross ventilation all around it. And then a
Right.
lot of people don't know that mantids also need to be able to molt while they're hanging upside down. So my main thing is when I'm bringing them to shows, I make sure that I have some type of material at the top so that when they want to molt, they can molt with ease without any complications. And they also drink water, so hydration is very important to them as well.
Right. So is there a species of tarantula that you do not have but want?
Yes, there are two species of Typhoschlania. The Brazilian jewel is one that we all love and most of us have, but there are certain new species or subspecies of that Typhoschlania genus since the Brazilian ban on exportation of their
Mm-hmm.
flora and fauna, you know, it's very hard to obtain legally. So that would be one that I really, really would like to eventually have, as long as it wasn't harming the ecosystem of Brazil. And if I could obtain it legally and from a captive bred, specimen.
Yeah, that's the one that Chris wants. He probably doesn't know what we're talking about. Chris, we're talking about the T. Celadonia.
Yeah,
Yeah, he wants that one, but that's just a very difficult species. Very difficult.
absolutely.
Yeah. So what expectations do you have within the hobby of care guides and people just starting to get into the hobby? Like, what expectations do you think you have when people start to get into the hobby?
Well, I try not to live by expectations. I always hope for the best, but I make sure I plan for the worst. But and it's kind of hard to put my expectations on somebody else. We're all sentient beings, but I do have hopes. I would hope that people take this serious. This isn't something that you get and you put on the shelf as a decoration piece. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to keep them alive. to learn what their needs are and to then be able to cater to those needs. It's not as simple as putting it in a small enclosure and putting it on the shelf and expecting it to be there, 10 years later. It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
They're living beings and they have needs. And I would like to think that they have wants, and they're very intelligent, highly intelligent.
Yes.
And so my expectation, it would be more of a hope. I just hope when you get into this hobby or lifestyle, don't underestimate the intelligence of a life form different from you. They have intelligence. Everything that is a life form that it has survived millions of years, thousands of years, has the ability to reproduce, knows when it's hungry, knows how to go catch its food, knows when a predator is in its presence and when to retreat, is intelligent. And that's a high level of intelligence. Tarantulas, for example, they are more in tune with their environment than most human beings. Their setae, it can be used for New Worlds. Their setae, or their urticating hairs, can be used as a defense mechanism, but it also can be used to feel the biometric pressure. It can be used to tell the changes in wind pressure. If there's a prey item in the near vicinity, if there's a threat in the near vicinity, they can feel the vibrations and know by the frequency of the vibration whether it's a prey item or it's a potential threat. So my hope is get into this lifestyle, this hobby, see it as a lifestyle. You'll take it a lot more serious than as a hobby. Playing soccer, playing basketball is a hobby. Like, this is a lifestyle for us.
Yes.
We're entwined in this. Like, you see, you have your beautiful backdrop. You got your command in the back. You got your tree in the back. It's a lifestyle. So if you're going to get into this lifestyle, have an open mind. Never think that you know too much. Never get too big for your britches. And, each one teach one. Like, I still make mistakes. I just lost a Carabiner Versicolor egg sac because I should have taken it from the mother and rotated it myself. But, I have enough confidence to speak about that mistake. And it's time for us to stop trying to hide our mistakes. Let's talk about them. Let's learn from them, and let's become better stewards of this lifestyle.
That's right. Wow. Thank you for bringing that up, because a lot of people, they gatekeep and they don't like to admit their mistakes, but you never know, your mistake or my mistake could help somebody else, so they don't make that mistake, or just not even that, but they can learn through that too. So that's something that I really want to show people, because I used to be that. I used to be a person that didn't like to show mistakes, but now I do that. And whether or not it's a bad one or a good one, it's a learning thing for everyone. So what is something that you like to see change for the better in the hobby?
I would like a lot of the miseducation, as well as this is not a inclusive hobby or lifestyle. There's a lot of people who you just living in your truth, you could become their arch nemesis for no reason, like because of your genius.
Right. Yeah.
And so I would like to see that change. I feel like we should be more of a family instead of, okay, this group of people right here, we're going to work together, but those people, we don't talk to them. Or,
right.
I feel like we should be more inclusive. We should get over our differences. I don't like that for the most part. This can feel like high school all over again. So I feel like we should embrace our maturity and share our knowledge. And there was this saying, and it always stuck with me. And it was, I always put somebody that I meet in a position to teach me, because even the person that I may not like has something that they do so amazingly that maybe I am not as skilled in that arena that can teach me about it. So even the person that you don't like, find something, at least one thing that you admire about them, and see if you can learn from them, instead of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. It's time for us to learn from each other and actually be a community. You know, at some points, it doesn't feel like a community, but then at other times, it feels like the best community to be a
Mhm.
part of. So I don't want to just, shine the flashlight on what I would like to change, but I also want to shine the flashlight on what's amazing and beautiful about the community. We have a lot of knowledgeable people, a lot of people that see this as a lifestyle, that have been doing this for a long time and are actually being a part of the solution and not the problem.
Right. I liked this one comment by Kari. Normalize accountability. I really like that. And
Yes.
that is something we definitely need. So thank you for bringing that up, Kari. And thank you, Rashad, for saying that. What was that quote that you said? I want to write it down.
So it's basically, the person that you find yourself not liking, instead
Okay.
of just, writing them off, find at least one attribute about them that they excel in an area that you're not that proficient in, and see if you can learn something from them. Everybody that you meet, you should put in a position where you can learn from them. Just don't write them off. There's something about them that they're amazing at, and
Mhm.
you may not be that skilled in that arena. So take the time and see what it is you can learn from them, even if you don't like them. But hey,
Mhm.
you can learn from everybody.
Yeah, that's right. So what's something, I mean, you basically already said it, something positive, but what is something else, something positive that you can share with about the community?
Um, one thing that I really want to reiterate when it comes to speaking about the positives of the community is that it can definitely be a family environment. You know, I take my children almost everywhere I go, and they're embraced. I love that they're not, how could I say, they're not made uncomfortable when they're with me at expos or at trade shows. It's like the community embraces them. They love the fact that these young babies are so interested in learning about species, genuses, families, orders, phylums. They just
Silence.
it's a beautiful thing when you see the community embrace, vendors or specialists and breeders who have their children with them. I
Yeah.
think that that is remarkable. I love it. I think that that's the best way for these little ones to learn, is being hands-on and basically being
Yep.
engulfed in the environment.
Hands on. That's exactly right. Like my nephew, at first, when he was going to school, kids are like, their brains are like a sponge. What they see is what they do, right?
Yes.
So they see all these other kids, or they on TV, they see, oh, well, the spider, I'm scared. As he got a little older, he got to see me with mines. He went up to me and said, "Can I hold one?" I'm like, "Absolutely. Let me show you. Let me educate you." And so he also had uh like a feeling, like a bad feeling, like a texture feeling. So I helped him get through that fear. And so now he loves every animal. And then that's one thing that we need to show our kids is being hands on, because that's the only way that you're going to find out, you know? So I really
Absolutely.
love that. Yeah. And I'm glad that you got to bring your kids, that you expose them to something that's positive. So that's beautiful. Very beautiful.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So we have 3 minutes left. So I wanted to quickly thank you for being on the show, but also give shout outs to Caveman Reptiles, Spider People Official, Lace Balls Pythons, Arachno Kingdom, Megan from Fangs Out, Jen's Peculiar Exotics, Ashley Bloods and Brutes, Eight Legged Bugs, and Tarantula Cribs, and so on and so forth, that we will definitely have on the show. But thank you for everyone for this first episode, providing great insights, Rashad. Thank you so much.
Of
And
course.
Juice's Arthropods, go check them out. as well. And also Frank's Buggin 661. Go check them out as well. And a very special thank you to Chris at Untamed and Unhinged Reptiles for providing this, not only for me, but for all of us. Because, you know, without these podcasts, where would we be? Looking through the books, that's something that's outdated. You know, we wouldn't have this interchange, you know. Oh, I like that comment. Me and my youngest are going to an expo at the end of the month in Houston. Wow. I got into this hobby for something me and my youngest to do together. Wow, that's beautiful. See, that's something that I always wanted to see and look at and love to see, is when families come together and they go to these expos and they go to these shows. And it's something that I love to see because it's hands-on, like you said. So yeah, when's your next expo that coming up?
Okay, so my next expo will actually be in Daly City. So that's going to be San Francisco, California, at the Cow Palace. It's going to be by it's hosted by Central Valley Reptile, and it's going to be a great show. It hasn't been a show out there in a long time. You know, you could catch me at the show, or you can, you know, catch me on my website, maryswebs.com, or our Morph Market. Gotta love them. True Exotics West. So that's TRUEXOTICSWEST. And check us out. You know, we got amazing testimonials, amazing products, and captive bred is the way to go when it comes to us. So
yeah.
Thank you so much, Arachnid Cat. I greatly appreciate you for having me. And it's definitely been a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you for your insight. You have been so helpful and amazing. So thank you. And so for next week, we will have, for next Tuesday, guys, write it down. Next Tuesday, we will have Junior from Epic Reptiles. We will be talking a lot more. And we're going to continue with these podcasts talking about the educational process. So we had our first episode with Rashad. Thank you so much for being here. We love you, and thank you.
Thank you.
Morph Market, guys. Thank you, everyone, for being here, and we're going to end it here today.
Okay, for sure. Thank you.
Bye.
In the shadows where we weave, cat's voice spins webs of belief. Tarantulas with names like art, science and spiders tear the dark. Whispered wonders in the